Forget everything Hollywood showed you about stagecoaches, those scenes of good guys saving damsels in distress. Pure lies. The reality was brutal. Passengers packed together for days, roads that wrecked your body, constant robberies, and deadly accidents. Come with me to discover 20 facts that will forever change the way you see the Old West. Subscribe and leave a like to show your support. Fact 1. The math of greed. The companies did the numbers on paper, cold and merciless. Every extra passenger meant straight profit in the owner's pockets, so they took a carriage designed to carry 6 souls with some comfort and crammed 9 inside. Across the ocean, the English rode in much roomier stagecoaches, but over here, on American soil, they chose the sardine can way. Diaries from the time tell heartbreaking stories, legs numb for days on end, knees bumping into the knees of sweaty strangers, and that bucket in the corner that served as a bathroom for everyone, men, women, and children. One Civil War veteran even said the trench in Virginia smelled better than that closed-up carriage in the summer. And he had seen some heavy stuff on the battlefield. Anyone who climbed in there knew they would arrive, but they'd arrive broken. Fact 2. Your lungs became a filter. That dust wasn't just annoying, no sir. It was a plain and simple invasion of the body. With every breath taken inside that stagecoach, fine silica particles went down your throat and settled deep in the lungs, where no one could get them out. Old West miners and travelers crossing the plains suffered from the same terrible illness without even knowing it, silicosis, and a nasty case of it. Doctors back then didn't even have a name for the disease. They wrote it down in their little notebooks as wanderer's cough and told the person to rest, as if rest would fix it. The wet handkerchief tied over the face, a trick everyone swore worked, turned to mud in minutes and made it even harder to breathe. By the end of the journey, whoever crossed that desert might arrive on the other side with fuller pockets. But they paid a high price, years of life and breath they would never get back. Fact 3. Why crime paid. Think about it for a second. In the late 19th century, Wells Fargo sent stagecoaches across California loaded with gold, with just one driver up on the box and no armed guard beside him. It was basically a bank rolling down the road with its doors wide open. You don't have to be a genius to understand why so many men dropped the hoe and became outlaws. The story of Black Bart sums it up well. The man robbed 28 stagecoaches, left little poems at the crime scenes, and became a celebrity in the newspapers. It was that math of easy robbery that forced the company to hire a new professional, the shotgun messenger, the guy sitting next to the driver with a shotgun in his lap. And here's the detail few people know. The phrase, riding shotgun, which every American uses today to talk about the passenger seat, was born right there, from the fear of being robbed around the next bend. Fact 4. When physics became a death sentence. Here's something few people stop to think about. Back then, what we now call safety engineering didn't exist. There was prayer, and barely even that. All it took was one wheel giving out at high speed for the whole stagecoach to turn into a pile of splinters, and passengers would be thrown like sacks of flour against rock. Frontier doctors out in Wyoming wrote some grim things in their notebooks. Crushed skulls, femurs sticking out through skin, people dying before help even got close. And there's one more detail that will surprise you. The driver had a shorter life expectancy than a Pennsylvania coal miner. Most didn't make it past their first year on the job. And do you know why they paid so well to sit up on that box? Simple. No one in their right mind wanted the job. It was money for anyone willing to gamble their own skin on the road. Fact 5. the invisible empire of horses. Few people stop to think about what made a stagecoach cross the country from one end to the other. And let me tell you, it was an operation the size of a military campaign. Every 15 miles, there was a relay station, with rested horses ready to take the place of the ones coming in exhausted from the road. In the middle of the desert, men dug wells and pulled up water by hand. Wagons loaded with hay crossed indigenous territory in the dark, far from the passengers' eyes. It was basically the Uber of the 19th century, but with one brutal detail. Each horse lasted only a few months before dropping dead from exhaustion. The animals were swapped out like machine parts. And that's where the part nobody tells you in school books comes in. The companies signed fat contracts with backcountry ranchers, simple people who quietly got rich just selling replacement horses so the Old West could keep turning. Fact 6. The wagon that carried the future and death. Here's something almost nobody tells you in school books. The stagecoach didn't just carry letters and passengers across the Old West. It carried germs. Every stop in an isolated village, every horse change at a remote station, left behind something no one could see with the naked eye. Native tribes that had never crossed paths with white men caught measles, smallpox, the flu. Weeks after the first stagecoach passed through, entire villages were empty. Frontier doctors started to notice the pattern. A new route opened. An outbreak followed. Back then, no one really knew what a virus was, and germ theory was still in its early stages. All that was left was the death toll. The same wheel that stitched the country from coast to coast also spread disease across the map, progress and plague, traveling side by side on the same wooden bench. Fact 7. The price nobody saw, hidden in the spine. Here's something that will make you think twice before envying anyone who traveled by stagecoach in the Old West. Those wagons didn't have real shock absorbers. What took the hit were thick leather straps running under the cabin, pretending to be suspension. The result? Every hole in the road hit the passenger's spine directly, not the seat. And today, science confirms what doctors already suspected back then. Those repeated jolts, day after day, caused the same kind of brain damage we see in retired football players. Men in their 30s showed up at the doctor's office with an old man's spine, a kidney out of place, a liver bruised on the inside. People who traveled a lot aged fast on the inside, even if they looked healthy on the outside. It wasn't transportation, my friend. It was accumulated trauma, dressed up as progress. Fact 8. Accidental microbiology. Stopping at a stagecoach station to eat in the Old West was basically betting your life in a game of chance. The meat hung in salt for days, sometimes weeks, with no refrigeration at all. The bread grew green mold before it even reached the table. And the well water? It came with everything you can imagine, and things you're better off not imagining. But there's one curious detail in this whole story. Whoever could handle it ended up with a gut tougher than boot leather. The average American of the 19th century had an immune system forged the hard way, day after day. And here's the truly scary fact, my friend. Dysentery killed far more pioneers on the way west than revolver bullets, arrows, or saloon fights combined. Whoever reached the destination got there with their clothes hanging loose on their body and a story to tell. Fact 9. The accidental sleep experiment. Imagine spending 25 straight days in a stagecoach between Missouri and California without stopping to get a proper night's sleep even once. Well, that's exactly what passengers on the Butterfield Overland Mail faced around 1858. And what modern science has discovered about it is chilling. After 72 hours without sleep, the human brain starts playing serious tricks on you. Shadows in the dust turned into human figures. Snapping branches sounded like voices calling your name. Passengers swore they had seen riders outside who simply weren't there. It wasn't cowardice, it wasn't weakness of spirit. It was the brain breaking down, plain and simple. U.S. Army studies with soldiers in training confirm all of this today. Those men of the Old West, without knowing it, became guinea pigs in a brutal experiment no one had the courage to do on purpose. Fact 10. The social map on wheels. It may sound strange, but the old stagecoach of the Old West was the United States in miniature, rolling through the dust. Anyone with money in their pocket traveled inside, sitting on the cushions. Anyone with less rode on top, on the roof, facing sun, rain, and wind in their face. And there were people who couldn't even climb onto the roof. The Chinese men who broke their backs building the Transcontinental Railroad, Native Americans, and newly freed black people after the Civil War. Some companies put it in writing, in black and white, that those people couldn't board. Others passed the hot potato to the driver to decide who got in and who got left behind. That free frontier Hollywood sells in every Western had a ticket price, social class, and a closed door. The Jim Crow laws, which many people think were born on trains and streetcars in the South, were actually already rolling along the trails long before they became law. Fact 11. The female engineering of survival. Think about it. Traveling alone in a stagecoach in the Old West was practically signing your own death warrant. And that's where women created a defense manual that no history book tells properly. That 8-inch hat pin that looked like decoration? It turned into a dagger when things got bad. Inside the corset, many hid a loaded derringer, small enough to fit in the palm of a hand. But the smartest trick was social, pretending to be married to a stranger on board, making up a violent husband waiting at the final stop, or even faking symptoms of contagious madness to keep bad-intentioned men away. The drivers played along and had their own code. A woman traveling alone sat near the door, ready to jump if things got ugly. It was a silent war, fought every day, against a danger no one dared put on paper. Fact 12. The math nobody wanted to do. Imagine crossing Texas in a stagecoach, open plains on both sides with nowhere to hide. That's how travelers felt in the 19th century. Fish in a tank, waiting for the attack. And the Comanches knew it better than anyone. U.S. Army officers openly admitted that those warriors rode better than any cavalry in Europe. They grew up on horseback, shooting arrows while hanging off the side, using the animal as a shield. Now think about this math. A settler took about 30 seconds to reload his muzzle-loading rifle. In that same time, a Comanche archer could fire 12 accurate arrows. There was no tactic, no engineering, no fort that could solve that equation. Entire routes were simply wiped off the maps, abandoned, because no one was willing to take the risk anymore. And here's the part few people tell. The white man's technology lost badly to pure physics and mastery of the land. Fact 13. The cold that killed in silence. Imagine crossing the Rocky Mountains at 40 degrees below zero, squeezed inside a wooden box on wheels. It sounds exaggerated, but that was the reality of stagecoach travel in the American winter. And there's one detail almost nobody realizes. Wind isn't just cold. It multiplies the body's heat loss. Researchers later discovered that with strong wind, the human body loses heat up to 25 times faster than in still air. Sitting down, with no room to move your muscles and generate heat, the passenger basically turned into a block of ice, slowly, without noticing. Children and old people were always the first to go, usually in their sleep, without a scream, without warning. When the stagecoach stopped at the next station, there they were, quiet forever. And the companies, they didn't pay the families a single cent. To them, it was just the risk of travel. Cruel. But that was how the Old West worked. Fact 14. The leather oven. Here's something few people talk about when it comes to the Old West. Crossing the Mojave Desert in a stagecoach was basically stepping into a moving oven. The wood of the carriage soaked up the sun all day. The leather on the seats and curtains trapped that heat inside, and ventilation. Forget it. There wasn't any. And here's the detail that catches most people by surprise. It was worse than standing out in the open sun. The person's body kept sweating nonstop, but the sweat didn't evaporate. So the body's natural cooling system simply shut down. The internal temperature kept rising and rising, and the guy was cooking from the inside without even realizing it. The toughest drivers learned the hard way. They only traveled at night, turning the whole routine upside down. But anyone who insisted on traveling during the day often didn't make it to the next stop. They died roasted from the inside, right there on the seat. Fact 15. The system of broken trust. That's right, my friend, get this. Your entire baggage depended on a crumpled piece of paper in the driver's pocket. Written in pencil, it said something like 3 trunks, 2 bags. No name, no owner, no signature. If it disappeared, it disappeared. Wells Fargo did have its own system. Muleteers and ranchers along the trails reported anything strange they saw on the way. But compensation? It was your word against theirs. And guess who lost? The company's internal records, still kept to this day, show one curious detail. Certain lost items always ended up in the hands of the same drivers on the same routes. It wasn't a coincidence, no sir. It was petty theft, organized from the inside, people making money under the table with a straight face. Everybody suspected it, but nobody opened their mouth, because accusing Wells Fargo in the Old West was asking to walk on foot for the rest of your life. Fact 16. Human fuel. Look, nobody likes to admit it, but the driver didn't drink because he was addicted. He drank because whiskey was his medicine cabinet. Think about it. It worked as an anesthetic for back pain after 12 hours on a hard seat, brought down fever in the freezing winter, calmed his nerves when bandits showed up around the bend, and gave him that liquid courage to face a 1,000-foot cliff. All in one bottle. The stagecoach companies knew this very well. And what sober man in his right mind would want that job? Then came the side effect, and you could see it coming from a mile away. Spooked horses, a bad turn, the carriage rolling down a ravine. The whole system ran on booze, and they kept it that way because replacing the part cost more than burying a passenger. The Old West rode drunk, my friend, literally. Fact 17. The economic bubble of the West. Imagine paying $200 for a ticket in 1850. That sounds like little today, but back then, it was a full year's wages for an average worker. That's right, 12 months of sweat for a single ticket. It was a blatant monopoly, and nobody had anywhere to run. And look at what families did. They mortgaged the farm, sold the cattle, the plow, even the living room furniture. All for the promise of easy gold that the newspapers never got tired of splashing across the front page. The detail nobody told you? Those same newspapers were funded by the companies selling the tickets. Think about that for a second. It was plain and simple, the first big bubble of American media. Most people never paid off the debts. Worse, children inherited the hole left by parents who died along the way, without ever seeing a single nugget. Fact 18. Predators learning capitalism. Here's something that will make you think twice about wild animals. Wolves and grizzly bears didn't attack wagon trains out of pure instinct. No, sir, they learned. These animals' brains work like association machines. The sound of wagon wheels, plus the smell of tired horses, became a sign of a guaranteed dinner. Simple as that. And look how interesting this is. Some wolf packs started dividing up tasks during attacks. One group distracted, the other attacked from behind, all coordinated like a well-trained team. Grizzlies, meanwhile, memorized the schedules of trade routes. They knew when the food was coming through. Nature adapted to human logistics faster than any pioneer ever imagined. The trade routes, once symbols of progress, became hunting grounds recorded in diaries from the time. Man thought he controlled the frontier. The frontier was actually studying man. Fact 19. The cartel before antitrust law. Here's something that will surprise you. Wells Fargo, in the 1870s, basically wrote the manual for the modern monopoly, decades before Uncle Sam had any laws to stop that kind of move. With no competition on the road, they stretched out travel times on purpose just to justify higher fares in the customer's pocket. And there's more. The ads back then sold safety and speed that the company itself knew, deep down, it wasn't going to deliver. Believe it, that's where that old American marketing tactic was born, painting a pretty reality on paper, while behind the scenes, the operation ran a whole different way. It took decades for Congress to get antitrust laws in place to deal with that mess. In the end, the Stagecoach was the real laboratory for the predatory capitalism we still know today. Fact 20. The trauma that had no name. Here's something few people stop to think about. Those survivors who came back home after crossing the frontier had a different look in their eyes. Empty. Doctors back then were already describing it. Long before there was a diagnosis, they called it prairie madness, the madness of the prairie. That's right. It was exactly the same PTSD that was only seriously studied in soldiers who came back from Europe and Vietnam decades later. Many died in silence because no one had a word for what they felt inside. Hollywood doesn't tell that part because trauma doesn't fill movie theaters. But you should know this. That famous American 1,000-yard stare wasn't born in war. It was born on those dirt roads,